The transport ship's engines hummed to life across the landing platform as Dr. Sarah Chun finished loading her medical supplies into the rover. She had been assigned to the remote research station on Kepler 442b for 8 months now, studying the planet's unique wildlife alongside the Zoltharian scientific expedition. The tall, blue-skinned aliens have been generous hosts, sharing their advanced technology and vast knowledge of xenobiology. Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead as she secured the last container. The station's main compound buzzed with activity as the Zoltharians prepared for their departure. Their mission was complete, samples collected, data gathered. They would return to their homeworld with enough research material to occupy their scientists for decades. Dr. Chun, came a melodic voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Coordinator Vexthal approaching, his 4 arms carrying various data tablets. The Zoltharian's large, black eyes seemed troubled. "We must discuss something before our departure." Sarah nodded, following Vexthal toward the holding area behind the main laboratory. She had always respected the Zoltharian approach to research, methodical, thorough, and surprisingly ethical for such an advanced species. They treated captured specimens well, studying them carefully before releasing them back into the wild. "There is one specimen we cannot transport," Vexthal explained as they walked. "The young mammoth-class creature we rescued 3 weeks ago. Its trunk injury has not healed as expected." Sarah remembered the day they had found the creature. The Zoltharians called them woolly titans, massive herbivores that roamed the planet's northern continents in small family groups. This particular specimen was barely an adolescent, roughly the size of an earth elephant, with thick purple fur and a trunk that could extend to nearly 4 meters in length. They entered the holding area, and Sarah immediately saw the creature in question. It stood in a large enclosure, favoring its left side heavily. Its trunk, normally a graceful appendage capable of delicate manipulation, hung at an awkward angle. The injury was clearly visible, a deep gash along the middle section where the creature had been caught in a rock slide. "We have applied our standard healing treatments," Vexthal continued, his voice carrying a note of frustration. "The wound is closed, but the internal damage to the muscular and nervous systems remains. Our ship's medical bay is not equipped for such extensive reconstructive work, and the journey to our homeworld would take 18 standard months." Sarah approached the enclosure slowly. The creature's large, intelligent eyes tracked her movement. Despite being an alien species, there was something deeply familiar about the way it looked at her, a mixture of pain, confusion, and hope that transcended species barriers. "What do you plan to do?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We must leave it here," Vexthal said quietly. "In its current condition, it cannot survive in the wild. The tribe has already moved on, following their migration route. A solitary woolly titan with a damaged trunk cannot forage effectively or defend itself from predators." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had spent enough time studying these creatures to understand what Vexthal was really saying. They were abandoning the animal to die. "Have you considered all treatment options?" Sarah asked, her mind already racing through possibilities. Vexthal's expression showed genuine regret. "Our medical technology, while advanced, is designed primarily for Zoltharian physiology. The neural pathways and muscle fiber arrangements in this species are unlike anything in our database. We lack the specialized knowledge to repair such complex damage." Sarah stood in silence for a moment, watching the creature. It had attempted to pick up a piece of fruit with its damaged trunk, but the appendage trembled and failed to maintain the proper grip. The fruit fell to the ground, and the creature made a low, mournful sound. "What if I stay?" Sarah said suddenly. Vexthal turned all 4 of his arms toward her in surprise. "Dr. Chun, the research station will be deactivated once we depart. You would be completely isolated on an alien world with minimal supplies." "But I wouldn't be completely without resources," Sarah replied, her mind working through the logistics. "The station's medical bay would remain functional. I have my surgical equipment, and your team could leave behind any relevant medical scanners and treatment devices. Even if such equipment were available, you lack the expertise to perform such a complex procedure on an alien species, Vexthal pointed out reasonably. Sarah smiled grimly. Actually, I might be the only one here who does have the right kind of expertise. She explained her background to the surprised Zeltharian. Before joining the interspecies research program, Sarah had specialized in veterinary neurosurgery on Earth. She had spent years working with elephants, repairing trunk injuries caused by snares, accidents, and conflicts with humans. The procedures required incredible precision and deep understanding of the complex nervous system that controlled the trunk's movement. The underlying principles might be similar, Sarah continued, warming to the idea. Both species use their trunks as primary manipulation tools. Both rely on intricate networks of muscles and nerves to achieve fine motor control. If I can adapt my techniques to account for the physiological differences, Vexthal remained skeptical. The risk would be enormous. Even if you succeeded in the surgery, you would be stranded here for months during the recovery period. Our next scheduled expedition to this system is not planned for 3 years. I understand the risks, Sarah said firmly, but I can't just walk away and let this creature die when I might be able to help. They spent the next several hours in intense discussion. Vexthal consulted with his medical team and the expedition commander. They ran detailed scans of the creature's injury, comparing the anatomy to Sarah's Earth elephant data. The similarities were striking enough to give credibility to her proposal. In the end, it was the creature itself that made the decision for them. As they debated, it had been watching Sarah intently. When she approached the enclosure again, it slowly extended its damaged trunk toward her. Despite the obvious pain, it gently touched her hand with the tip of the injured appendage. It trusts you, Vexthal observed. Woolly titans are extremely intelligent. They form deep emotional bonds and have been known to remember kindnesses for decades. The Zeltharian expedition commander, a stern female named Kithura, initially opposed the plan entirely. She argued that it was too dangerous to leave a human alone on the planet, that the mission protocols didn't allow for such risks. But Sarah's determination and Vexthal's growing support eventually wore down her resistance. Very well, Kithura finally agreed. But you will have comprehensive communication equipment. You will report your status daily. And if at any point the situation becomes untenable, you will activate the emergency beacon and abandon the creature. Sarah nodded, though privately she doubted she would ever abandon her patient once she committed to the surgery. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. The Zeltharians reconfigured the medical bay with equipment suitable for the operation. They left behind portable scanners, surgical tools adapted for the creature's size, and detailed anatomical models based on their scans. Most importantly, they provided a comprehensive medical database that included information about similar species from other worlds. Sarah spent hours studying the creature's behavior, learning its vocalizations and body language. She named it Torvin, after an old friend who had shown similar stubbornness in the face of adversity. Torvin seemed to understand that something significant was happening. The creature watched the preparations with obvious intelligence, occasionally offering soft rumbles that sounded almost like encouragement. On the final evening before the Zeltharian departure, Sarah sat beside Torvin's enclosure, reviewing her surgical plan one last time. The procedure would be incredibly complex. She would need to repair damaged nerve bundles, reconstruct torn muscle fibers, and restore the delicate hydraulic system that allowed the trunk to function. You know, back on Earth, they used to say that elephants never forget, Sarah told Torvin quietly. I wonder if your species has the same trait. If you do, I hope you'll remember that not all aliens want to hurt you. Torvin responded with a gentle touch of his trunk tip against her shoulder. The morning of departure arrived with a spectacular sunrise that painted the alien sky in shades of orange and purple. Sarah stood on the landing platform, watching as the Zeltharian transport ship prepared for takeoff. Vexthal approached her one final time. Are you certain about this decision, Dr. Chun? He asked. Sarah looked back toward the medical complex where Torvin waited. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow. Yes, I want to give him one more day to adjust to being alone with me. Trust is going to be crucial for this to work. Vexthal extended one of his 4 hands in the human gesture of farewell. You possess a quality that our species greatly admires, Dr. Chun. You see suffering and feel compelled to act, regardless of the personal cost. It is perhaps the most defining characteristic of humanity that we have observed. Sarah shook his hand. Take care, Vexthal, and thank you for giving me the chance to try this. The transport ship lifted off with a thunderous roar, quickly disappearing into the alien sky. Sarah stood alone on the platform for several minutes, feeling the weight of her decision settle around her. She was now the only human on an alien world, responsible for a creature that depended entirely on her skill and determination. When she returned to the medical complex, Torvin was waiting at the front of his enclosure. The creature had been watching the departure through the large windows and seemed to understand that the other aliens were gone. Sarah approached slowly, speaking in the soft, reassuring tone she had learned to use with frightened animals. "It's just you and me now, big guy," she said, opening the enclosure door. For the first time since his injury, Torvin was free to leave the confined space. He stepped out cautiously, testing his weight on his injured side. Sarah had prepared a larger area for him in the main laboratory, with soft bedding and plenty of the native fruits he preferred. She guided him to the space, marveling at how naturally he followed her lead. Despite being a creature from an alien world, Torvin's behavior reminded her strongly of the elephants she had worked with on Earth, intelligent, emotional, and capable of forming deep bonds with caregivers. That evening, Sarah made her final preparations for the surgery. She reviewed the anatomical scans one more time, double-checked her surgical instruments, and ran diagnostics on all the medical equipment. The Zeltharians had left her with everything she needed, but the success or failure of the procedure would depend entirely on her own skill and adaptability. As night fell over the research station, Sarah sat beside Torvin in the laboratory. The creature had settled comfortably on the soft bedding, occasionally reaching out with his damaged trunk to touch her hand. Despite the pain he must be feeling, Torvin seemed calmer than he had since his injury. "Tomorrow's going to be a big day for both of us," Sarah told him. "I'm going to do everything I can to fix your trunk, but I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" Torvin made a low, rumbling sound that Sarah chose to interpret as agreement. She spent the night sleeping nearby, wanting to be close in case the creature became distressed. Her dreams were filled with images of the upcoming surgery, both hopeful visions of success and nightmare scenarios of failure. When dawn broke over the alien landscape, Sarah woke to find Torvin watching her with those large, intelligent eyes. Today would determine whether her decision to stay had been an act of heroism or foolish pride. Either way, there was no turning back now. Sarah began the morning by carefully preparing the surgical suite. The Zeltharian medical bay was impressively advanced, with holographic displays that could show 3-dimensional anatomical models and scanners that could monitor biological functions in real time. She had spent weeks familiarizing herself with the alien technology, but today would be the ultimate test of her adaptation skills. Torvin seemed to sense the importance of the day. The creature followed Sarah's movements with unusual attention, occasionally offering soft vocalizations that sounded almost like questions. Sarah had learned to recognize several distinct sounds in Torvin's communication repertoire: curiosity, contentment, pain, and what she interpreted as affection. "Today's the day, my friend," Sarah said, gently stroking the thick purple fur along Torvin's neck. "We're going to fix that trunk of yours." The first challenge was anesthesia. The Zeltharians had left detailed notes about safe sedation protocols for woolly titans, but Sarah knew that every individual could react differently to medication. She started with a mild sedative to calm Torvin's nerves, monitoring his vital signs carefully through the alien medical sensors. Torvin accepted the injection with remarkable trust, barely flinching as the needle penetrated his thick hide. Within minutes, his posture relaxed, though his eyes remained alert and focused on Sarah. The partial sedation would be sufficient for the initial examination and preparation phases. Sarah began by conducting a thorough scan of the injured trunk. The Zoltharian medical scanners were far more advanced than anything she had used on Earth, capable of showing individual nerve fibers and muscle bundles in perfect detail. What she saw made her stomach clench with worry. The damage was even more extensive than the initial scans had revealed. The rockslide had not only severed major muscle groups, but had also damaged several primary nerve clusters that controlled fine motor movements. On Earth, such an injury would likely have resulted in permanent paralysis of the affected area. But Sarah had noticed something the Zoltharians had missed. The neural pathways in woolly titans showed remarkable redundancy, with backup connections that could potentially be activated with the right surgical intervention. "You're tougher than you look," Sarah murmured, studying the holographic display. "Your nervous system has built-in backup circuits that these aliens didn't recognize. That's going to be our advantage." She spent 2 hours mapping the injury site, identifying which structures could be repaired and which would need to be bypassed entirely. The surgery would require her to work with microscopic precision, reconnecting nerve fibers that were thinner than human hair while avoiding damage to surrounding tissues. When Sarah was satisfied with her surgical plan, she administered the full anesthesia. Torvin's eyes slowly closed as the powerful sedative took effect, but not before he managed one final gentle touch of his trunk tip against her hand. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at the gesture of trust. The surgical suite fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitoring equipment. Sarah took a deep breath, centered herself the way she had learned during her residency, and made the first incision. Working on an alien species required constant adaptation. The tissue responded differently to her instruments than Earth animals would have. The blood was a darker purple than she expected and clotted at a different rate. But the underlying principles of surgery remained the same: careful dissection, precise suturing, and, above all, respect for the intricate biological systems she was trying to repair. Sarah worked for 6 hours straight, pausing only to hydrate and rest her hands. The most challenging part came when she reached the damaged nerve clusters. Using microsurgical techniques, she carefully removed scar tissue and aligned the severed nerve fibers. The Zoltharian equipment included a specialized laser that could fuse nerve endings at the cellular level, a technology far beyond anything available on Earth. "Come on," Sarah whispered as she worked on a particularly difficult connection. "You can do this. Your body wants to heal. I just need to give it the right framework." The breakthrough came when she discovered the backup neural pathways. Hidden beneath the primary nerve trunk was a secondary network that had been dormant since Torvin's injury. With careful stimulation using the alien medical equipment, Sarah was able to activate these pathways and create new connections to bypass the most severely damaged areas. As the hours passed, Sarah fell into the focused trance that experienced surgeons knew well. The outside world ceased to exist, and there was only the delicate work of reconstruction. She rebuilt muscle attachments using biocompatible materials from the Zoltharian medical supplies, creating flexible connections that would allow for natural movement. The final phase involved testing the restored connections. Using gentle electrical stimulation, Sarah was able to trigger movement in the repaired trunk segments. To her amazement, the response was immediate and coordinated. The backup neural pathways were functioning perfectly, providing motor control that was actually superior to the original configuration. "Incredible," Sarah breathed, watching the unconscious trunk respond to her commands. "You've got redundant systems the Zoltharians never even suspected. No wonder your species survived on this world for millions of years." The surgery concluded after 8 hours. Sarah carefully closed the incision sites and applied the Zoltharian equivalent of bandages, a flexible, bioactive membrane that would promote healing while protecting the surgical site. She was exhausted but exhilarated. The technical aspects of the procedure had gone better than her most optimistic projections. Now came the waiting. Torvin would need several hours to recover from the anesthesia and days to adapt to the restored neural pathways. Sarah settled into a chair beside the recovery area, monitoring his vital signs and watching for any signs of complications. When Torvin finally began to wake, his first instinct was to try moving his trunk. Sarah held her breath as the creature slowly lifted the repaired appendage. The movement was unsteady at first, but gradually became more coordinated as his brain rediscovered the restored connections. "Easy, big guy," Sarah said softly, approaching the recovery bed. "Take your time. Your trunk needs to remember how to work again." Torvin's eyes focused on her with obvious recognition. He extended his trunk tentatively toward her face, the movement careful but deliberate. When his trunk tip gently touched her cheek, Sarah couldn't hold back tears of relief. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." The next few days passed in careful observation and rehabilitation. Sarah had developed a series of exercises designed to help Torvin regain full control of his trunk, starting with simple movements and gradually progressing to more complex tasks. The creature proved to be an eager and intelligent patient, seeming to understand the purpose of each exercise. On the third day post-surgery, Torvin successfully picked up a piece of fruit with his trunk and brought it to his mouth, the first time he had been able to feed himself since the injury. Sarah felt a surge of professional pride that was quickly overwhelmed by something deeper, genuine affection for this remarkable alien creature. "You're amazing, you know that?" she told him, scratching behind what she had learned were his preferred spots. "Your recovery rate is incredible. On Earth, this process would take weeks, maybe months." Torvin responded with a deep rumbling sound that Sarah had come to recognize as contentment. The creature had grown visibly stronger each day, not just physically, but emotionally as well. The depression and listlessness that had marked his early days of injury were gone, replaced by curiosity and playfulness that reminded Sarah why she had chosen to become a veterinarian in the first place. The breakthrough moment came on the 7th day. Sarah had been working with Torvin on fine motor control, using small objects that required delicate manipulation. She had placed a series of colored stones in front of him, each requiring a different type of grip to move effectively. Torvin approached the exercise with his usual focus, but this time something was different. Instead of simply moving the stones as Sarah had taught him, he began arranging them in a deliberate pattern. The colored stones formed a rough but unmistakable image, a representation of Sarah herself, complete with her distinctive hair color and the white coat she always wore. Sarah stared at the creation in amazement. Did you just make art?" Torvin stepped back from his work, trunk held high in obvious pride. The implications hit Sarah immediately. This wasn't just a recovered animal. This was a genuinely intelligent being expressing gratitude and affection through creative expression. "The Zeltharians completely underestimated your species," Sarah said, kneeling beside the stone portrait. "They saw you as advanced animals, but you're so much more than that." Over the following weeks, Torvin's abilities continued to expand. Not only had his trunk function been fully restored, but the surgical modifications seemed to have enhanced his capabilities beyond their original limits. The backup neural pathways that Sarah had activated provided finer control and greater strength than he had possessed before the injury. More importantly, the extended time together had created a bond between human and alien that neither had expected. Torvin had learned to understand basic English commands and had developed his own vocabulary of sounds and gestures to communicate with Sarah. They had become true companions, working together to maintain the research station and explore the surrounding landscape. Sarah documented everything meticulously, knowing that her observations would revolutionize understanding of woolly Titan intelligence when she eventually returned to civilization. But as the weeks turned into months, she found herself increasingly reluctant to think about leaving. The communication equipment allowed her to stay in contact with the Zeltharian expedition, providing regular updates on both her own condition and Torvin's recovery. Vexthal was particularly fascinated by her reports of enhanced trunk function and artistic behavior. "You have accomplished something remarkable, Dr. Chun," he told her during one of their scheduled communications. "Not only have you saved the creature's life, but you have revealed capabilities in the species that we completely missed during our study." "It makes me wonder what else we don't know," Sarah replied, watching Torvin arrange flowers into decorative patterns nearby. "How many intelligent species do we dismiss as just animals because their cognition doesn't match our expectations?" As the months passed, Sarah fell into a comfortable routine with her unusual patient and companion. Mornings were devoted to continued rehabilitation exercises, though these had evolved into more complex challenges that tested Torvin's problem-solving abilities as much as his physical recovery. Afternoons were spent exploring the area around the research station, with Torvin serving as both guide and protector. The alien landscape was breathtaking, filled with crystalline formations and strange flora that shifted colors with the changing light. Torvin knew the terrain intimately, leading Sarah to hidden water sources, fruit groves, and vantage points that offered spectacular views of the surrounding wilderness. It was during one of these explorations that they encountered other members of Torvin's species for the first time since the surgery. Sarah heard them before she saw them, a deep, harmonious calling that echoed across the valley below their observation point. "Your family," Sarah whispered, feeling a mixture of excitement and sadness. "They've come back." The small herd of woolly titans was moving through the valley, following one of their traditional migration routes. Sarah counted 8 adults and 3 juveniles, their purple fur gleaming in the alien sunlight. Torvin stood transfixed, his trunk extended toward the distant group as he called back in response. For a moment, Sarah thought he might leave immediately to rejoin his people. Instead, Torvin turned to look at her with an expression she had learned to read as concern. He approached and gently wrapped his trunk around her waist, a gesture that had become his way of showing protection and affection. "It's okay," Sarah told him, though her voice caught slightly. "You should go to them. You belong with your own kind." But Torvin remained beside her, clearly torn between his natural desire to rejoin his herd and his loyalty to the human who had saved his life. Sarah realized that the decision couldn't be forced. It had to come naturally when both of them were ready for the separation. That evening, as they returned to the research station, Sarah found herself contemplating the future for the first time in months. The Ziltharian rescue mission was still over a year away. Would Torvin wait that long to rejoin his people? Would she want him to? The questions remained unanswered as they settled in for another night together. But Sarah had learned to trust in the bond they had formed, knowing that whatever happened next would emerge from the deep understanding and mutual respect they had developed during their time together. The return of Torvin's herd created a turning point that Sarah had known would eventually come, but for which she still felt unprepared. Over the next several days, the woolly titans remained in the valley below the research station, their presence a constant reminder of the choice that lay ahead. Torvin spent hours each day watching them from the observation deck, his trunk extended toward his distant family as he listened to their calls. Sarah noticed changes in her companion's behavior. While he remained affectionate and responsive to her, there was a restlessness that hadn't been there before. He would often pause in the middle of activities, head tilted as if listening to sounds she couldn't hear. During their evening walks, he would stop and call out to the valley, receiving responses that seemed to comfort him. "You miss them," Sarah observed one evening as they sat together watching the sunset. "I can see it in everything you do." Torvin touched her shoulder with his trunk tip, a gesture that had become his way of acknowledging her understanding. But he didn't move toward the valley, didn't make any attempt to leave the research station. Sarah realized that her companion was waiting for permission, not just to leave, but to feel that leaving wouldn't be a betrayal of everything they had built together. The communication that would change everything came 3 weeks later. Sarah was conducting her routine check-in with the Ziltharian expedition when Vexthal delivered unexpected news. Dr. Chun, we have received authorization for an early rescue mission. A research vessel can be diverted to your location within 6 standard weeks. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. 6 weeks? But I thought the next scheduled mission wasn't for another year. Your reports about woolly Titan intelligence have created significant interest among our scientific community, Vexthal explained. The Expedition Council has approved an early retrieval specifically to document your findings and potentially capture additional specimens for study. The word capture sent a chill through Sarah. What kind of study? Extended behavioral analysis, cognitive testing, possible neural mapping. The standard protocols for newly identified intelligent species. Sarah's mind raced. The thought of Torvin or his family members being subjected to invasive testing filled her with dread. She had seen enough of Zeltharian scientific methods to know that their idea of study could be quite different from her own approach. I need to think about this, she told Vexthal. The situation here is more complex than you realize. After the communication ended, Sarah sat in silence for a long time, trying to process the implications. Rescue meant returning to civilization, to her career, to the life she had temporarily abandoned. But it also meant exposing Torvin's people to scientific scrutiny that might not respect their intelligence and dignity. That evening, she made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of her usual technical exercises with Torvin, she began teaching him about the concept of choice. Using simple drawings and gestures, she explained that the Zeltharians were returning, that she would be leaving, and that he could either come with her or stay with his people. Torvin listened intently, his large eyes fixed on her face as she spoke. When she finished, he stood quietly for several minutes, apparently processing the information. Then, he did something that took Sarah's breath away. Using his trunk with the delicate precision she had helped restore, Torvin began arranging objects around the room. Small stones, pieces of equipment, samples from their explorations. He created a complex three-dimensional map that clearly represented the research station, the valley where his herd waited, and the sky where the Zeltharian ship would eventually appear. But the most remarkable part was what he did next. Torvin placed a small purple flower at the research station position, another in the valley, and a third suspended from the ceiling to represent the departure point. Then, he looked at Sarah expectantly, waiting for her to understand his message. "You're asking me to choose too," Sarah realized. "You're saying the decision affects both of us." Torvin made the soft rumbling sound that meant agreement. Sarah spent that night walking the research station's corridors, trying to imagine returning to Earth without her remarkable companion. The thought of Torvin in his Zeltharian laboratory, being subjected to tests and observations by beings who saw him as a specimen rather than an individual, was unbearable. But keeping him with her meant separating him from his own species forever. Despite their deep bond, Sarah knew that Torvin belonged with his own kind, in the wild landscapes he had been born to roam. The solution came to her in the pre-dawn hours as she watched the distant herd moving through their morning foraging routine. It was audacious, possibly foolish, but it felt right in a way that no other option could. When Torvin found her at sunrise, Sarah had already begun making preparations. "I've made my choice," she told him, "but it's going to require something from both of us that we've never done before." Over the next 2 days, Sarah worked frantically to implement her plan. Using the research station's communication array, she sent detailed messages to multiple destinations, not just to the Zeltharian expedition, but to Earth's Interspecies Council, to several xenobiology research institutes, and to humanitarian organizations that specialized in protecting intelligent species. The messages contained all of her research data about woolly Titan intelligence, along with video documentation of Torvin's artistic abilities, problem-solving skills, and emotional complexity. She included her surgical notes and medical scans, proving that their enhanced capabilities were the result of previously unknown neural redundancy rather than artificial enhancement. Most importantly, she included her formal recommendation that woolly Titans be classified as a protected intelligent species, with their homeworld designated as a cultural preserve rather than a research site. The responses came quickly and were overwhelmingly supportive. The evidence Sarah had gathered was undeniable, and her reputation as a researcher gave weight to her conclusions. Within 48 hours, 3 different organizations had filed formal protection requests with the Galactic Council. But Sarah's most important communication was with the approaching Zeltharian rescue ship. "Captain Kithura," she said during their private channel discussion, "I'm requesting a significant modification to the rescue mission parameters. Dr. Chun, our orders are clear. We retrieve you and any research materials, then conduct additional specimen collection for extended study." "I'm formally refusing rescue under those conditions," Sarah replied calmly. "And I'm requesting that this conversation be recorded for submission to the Galactic Ethics Board." There was a long pause before Kethera responded. "Dr. Chun, you cannot remain on that planet indefinitely. Your supply situation will become critical within months. I understand the risks, but I won't be party to the exploitation of an intelligent species that trusted me with their welfare." Sarah's gambit worked. Faced with the possibility of a high-profile ethics violation, the Zeltharian Expedition Command agreed to modify their mission. Instead of specimen collection, they would conduct observational studies only, with strict protocols to ensure the Woolly Titan's voluntary participation and welfare. The rescue ship arrived exactly 6 weeks after Vexthal's initial communication. Sarah stood on the landing platform with Torvin beside her, both of them watching the sleek vessel settle onto the makeshift landing pad. "This is it, my friend," Sarah said softly. "Time to show them what you're really capable of." What followed was unlike any first contact situation in recorded history. Instead of a usual scenario of advanced aliens studying primitive creatures, Sarah introduced Torvin as an equal participant in the interaction. The Woolly Titan demonstrated his artistic abilities, his problem-solving skills, and his understanding of complex concepts that astounded the Zeltharian research team. Vexthal was particularly impressed when Torvin created a detailed sculpture depicting the surgical procedure that had saved his life, complete with accurate representations of the medical equipment and surgical techniques Sarah had used. "Remarkable," the Zeltharian scientist murmured. "The level of observational detail and symbolic representation indicates cognitive abilities that rival our own species." But the most significant moment came when Captain Kithera attempted to discuss research protocols with Sarah, treating Torvin as if he weren't present. The Woolly Titan stepped forward and, using a combination of gestures and vocalizations that Sarah had taught him, directly addressed the captain. Torvin's message was clear. His people would welcome peaceful contact and cultural exchange, but they would not submit to invasive study or capture. They were intelligent beings deserving of respect, not specimens for examination. The silence that followed Torvin's communication stretched for several minutes as the Zeltharians processed what they had witnessed. Finally, Captain Kithera formally acknowledged Torvin as a spokesperson for his species, the first time in Zeltharian history that they had recognized an alien species as intellectual equals upon first contact. The negotiations that followed established groundbreaking precedents for interspecies relations. The Woolly Titans would maintain sovereignty over their homeworld, with contact limited to voluntary cultural and scientific exchanges. Sarah would serve as the official liaison, splitting her time between Earth and Kepler 442b to facilitate communication between the 3 species. Most importantly, a permanent research station would be established that was jointly operated by humans, Zeltharians, and Woolly Titans working together as equals. On the day before the rescue ship's departure, Sarah walked with Torvin to the valley where his herd had been waiting patiently for their reunion. The adult Woolly Titans approached cautiously at first, but Torvin's enthusiastic greetings quickly put them at ease. Sarah watched in wonder as Torvin introduced her to his family, using the same combination of gestures and sounds he had learned to use with the Zeltharians. The response was immediate and welcoming. The herd surrounded her with gentle touches and soft vocalizations that clearly expressed gratitude. "They know what you did for me," Torvin seemed to be saying through his behavior. They understand that you saved my life. The eldest member of the herd, a magnificent female with intricate patterns in her purple fur, approached Sarah directly. Using her trunk with remarkable delicacy, she touched Sarah's forehead in what was clearly a blessing or formal acknowledgement. That evening, as Sarah prepared to leave with the Zeltharian ship, Torvin made his own choice clear. Instead of remaining with his herd, he approached the research station carrying a carefully crafted pack woven from local plant fibers. "You want to come with me?" Sarah realized. "You want to see Earth?" Torvin's enthusiastic response left no doubt about his decision. The bonds they had formed during his recovery had created a partnership that transcended species barriers. He trusted Sarah to show him new worlds, just as she had trusted him to guide her through his own. The journey to Earth took 3 months, during which Torvin became the first woolly Titan ambassador to human civilization. His intelligence and artistic abilities captured the imagination of people around the world, fundamentally changing humanity's understanding of what it meant to be intelligent. Upon their arrival, Sarah found herself at the center of a revolution in xenobiology and interspecies relations. The techniques she had developed for cross-species surgery were quickly adapted for other applications, while her documentation of woolly Titan intelligence became the foundation for new protocols in alien contact situations. But perhaps the most significant change was personal. Sarah's relationship with Torvin had evolved into something unprecedented, a true partnership between human and alien that was based on mutual respect, trust, and affection rather than domination or study. Years later, when asked about her decision to stay on Kepler 442b, Sarah would always give the same answer. "I went there to save an alien creature's life, but in the end, he saved mine." Torvin taught me that intelligence and compassion aren't human traits. They're universal principles that can bridge any gap between species. The research station on Kepler 442b thrived, becoming a model for peaceful coexistence and scientific cooperation. Woolly Titans regularly visited to work alongside human and Zeltharian researchers, sharing their unique perspectives on problems that had puzzled other species for centuries. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, word spread about a remarkable human who had looked at an injured alien creature and seen not a specimen to be studied, but a friend to be saved. It was, many agreed, the most human response possible, and perhaps the most hopeful sign for the future of interspecies relations in the galaxy. The injured trunk had healed completely, but the bonds formed during that healing would last forever. In choosing compassion over convenience, Sarah had not only saved one alien life. She had opened new possibilities for understanding and cooperation between species that might have remained forever separated by fear and mistrust. Torvin thrived in his role as cultural ambassador, splitting his time between Earth and his homeworld while maintaining the artistic pursuits that had first revealed his intelligence to the galaxy. His sculptures and paintings, created with the enhanced trunk control Sarah's surgery had provided, became treasured examples of non-human artistic expression. And in research stations throughout human space, veterinarians and xenobiologists studied Sarah's techniques, preparing for the day when they too might be called upon to choose between protocol and compassion. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the most important discoveries come not from studying alien life, but from choosing to save it.